Well, let's get more on the developing story from Romain Quivooij. He's a research fellow affiliated with the Radicalisation Studies Programme at Nanyang Technological University. He joins me live from Singapore on Skype. I suppose, given your expertise, do you think the people who carried out this attack are likely to have been radicalised within country? Francois Hollande has said that he believes it was planned outside and orchestrated inside.
Well, that is difficult to say for the moment. What we do know is that, according to President Francois Hollande, this was an attack that was orchestrated from and by the Islamic State. Now, we don't really know exactly who did that, how they did that, and why they did that, but it could be people which we usually refer to as homegrown terrorists. In other words, radicalized people, French nationals, yeah.
Are you surprised that incidents like this on such a large scale was able to happen in Paris following the fact that there was a serious terrorist attack in January, where there were in fact 3 days of attacks? So you had 18 people who were killed at the Charlie Hebdo satirical magazine. Then there was the attack on the Jewish supermarket, and also the policewoman who was killed on patrol.
Well, actually, I'm not surprised. And this tragedy was predictable. It was predictable for 3 reasons. Firstly, France, as you mentioned, has been hit in the past, in January 2015, 10 months ago. And since that time, there have been many terrorist threats from terrorist groups, including the Islamic State. Now, secondly, the French intelligence and security services have uncovered many terrorist plots during the last 2 years. And finally, it's extremely difficult to predict these kind of events and to prevent them, because we're talking about coordinated attacks made by a few individuals. And counterterrorism is really a huge challenge now.
What's the next step for the intelligence services? They're obviously keen to identify who these people are.
Yeah, that's going to be the next step indeed. That is going to be extremely challenging. For the moment, we don't have any information on this, but I'm pretty sure that all French intelligence services and security services are going to work on this, to identify these people, to understand what happened, and to clarify their motivations. That's going to be the priority number 1 now.
Now, we spoke to another analyst, and he suggested that perhaps this was a revenge attack following the bombings in Syria, which may well have killed, we have no confirmation of this, but the British citizen jihadi John Mohammed Emwazi. Do you think that's the case, or was this just a matter of coincidence? Because this was a very well-planned attack.
Yeah, it was. That being said, if IS wanted to retaliate for Jihadi John, they would strike the UK. I think France has been hit for different reasons. That's my opinion. First of all, because France is involved against terrorist groups in Africa and also in Iraq and Syria. So that makes France an important target. And secondly, you have like around 500 French nationals who are now fighting with Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. And therefore, French is a target also for that reason. So it's a bit too early to say that this attack happened because of Jihadi John.
Are we likely to see more security measures stepped up in a lot more European cities following what's happened in Paris?
Definitely. That's what happens all the time when these kind of events occur. You have to know that the French government already adopted a Security Act last year, and also a law strengthening the resources of intelligence agencies in June 2015. So there are already resources in terms of laws, in terms of security services and intelligence agencies. Now, an important question is to know whether French people will be ready to sacrifice personal liberties for security. And personally, I think that's the case. There must be a strong counter-reaction, and that implies new repressive laws, new security measures and so forth, especially to identify radicals before they commit terrorist attacks.
Well, I remember straight after the 7/7 bombings in London, there were a number of certain ethnic groups who were stopped and searched all the time as security measures were ramped up. So do you think that's going to unfold in France?
The situation in France, in the UK, are really different. I don't think that's going to happen, because the authorities, the French government, knows perfectly well that this is the last thing they need. So no, I don't think this kind of strategic mistake would be committed in France in the near future.
There was a huge amount of weaponry that was brought into the country. How on earth did they manage to get through border controls?
Well, that's a tough question. As you know, European Union is there's the Schengen zone in the European Union, which makes it quite easy to move freely from a country to another. That being said, you also have to know that in some suburbs and districts around Paris and around other big cities, you can easily find some heavy weaponry such as AK-47s, and therefore this is unfortunately not really a surprise.
We know that Daesh operates using social media. They're very sort of technologically savvy. That's how they've managed to recruit so many people. Their network clearly is vast.
It is indeed. We're talking here about a global network, actually. We're talking about people in Western Europe, people in other continents as well, like Asia and Southeast Asia also, so Western Europe. So this is this is not exactly terrorism when it comes about the Islamic State. It's more a state of global insurgency. And I think that's really important to take into account. And this kind of events is not only terrorism, it's much more. It's also an operation of strategic communication.
Okay, Romain Quivooij, I hope I've said your name right. Thank you very much for your insight.